Hi, everybody. This is Mary Glarum calling in from Richmond, Virginia, Product Tank, and I am so proud and excited to welcome six different product tanks to here today, from ranging from DC, Northern Virginia, to the Mid-Atlantic of Richmond and Charlotte, North Carolina, the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area, and all the way down south to Atlanta. It is my distinct pleasure to have this fireside chat today with my good friend Chidi Afulezi, who is based in Atlanta but splits his time between Atlanta and doing product work on the continent of Africa. This is a very casual, informal fireside chat, and we invite everybody to submit any questions that you may have for Chidi today. And we will put a Slido and a QR code up in just a second for submitting those questions. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce Chidi. So Brian, if you can go ahead to the next slide. So a little bit about Chidi. So he has decades of experience crafting digital experiences and developing leaders in teams. He is the founder of Red Cola Digital Labs and works as a product coach and has leadership and experience in his corporate roles at Turner Broadcasting, Time Warner, Sony Music, and AT&T Wireless, including entrepreneurial ventures like Acoma Media, the Core Venture Studio, and Collider. He's also worked with organizations across regions, scales, and sectors, innovators like General Assembly and the African Leadership University, the Reinvention Lab at Teach for America, and enterprises like CNN, Walmart, Disney, Delta Airlines, Home Depot, and United Technologies. He also works with international organizations like the World Health Organization, the MasterCard Foundation, and United Nations Global Compact. So with that, I'd like to welcome Chidi to the stage.
Hey, Mary. Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm actually getting ready to go to Kigali, Rwanda, for the Inspire Africa conference. So I'm in packet mode. Although I hope the shutdown doesn't affect me. So we'll see.
Understood. I wish you very safe travels. So, before we hop into this conversation about product and product being a mindset and an enabler to empower an entire continent, I just wanted to go over a few quick stats for the folks on the call about Africa. So I'm sure you all know that Africa is made up of many, many countries, but 54, in fact, and it has anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 different languages across those 54 countries. An interesting fun fact also is that Africa makes up 19% of the world's population. And if you want to put that in perspective to those of us in the United States, that US population of 342 million only makes up 4.2% of global population. The median age of the population in Africa is 19.3 years. So technology is very hip and very hot right now. And with that, I wanted to have Chidi tell us a little bit about his experience working in Africa and why he is so passionate about it.
Sure. I mean, this conversation is all about that, right? But just to get started, the continent, there's 54 countries. You said almost 3,000 languages. Well, let me just give you one country, Nigeria, right? Nigeria is almost 200 million people. Not 200, about 150, excuse me, 150 million people. It has about 250 ethnic groups, almost 500 languages. So there's so much. I mean, it's just I like to call it a live environment. It's just alive with all kinds of nuances and cultural wonders and all kinds of things. But it also offers opportunities to solve some really interesting problems. Now you take Nigeria and then you extrapolate to the other 54 countries, and now you're walking into some real complex yet exciting environments. And there are commonalities that allow us product people to do that work. But the real as we like to say in Nigeria, wahala. The real challenge is, when you try to address those differences, right? As you build across the continent. So it's an exciting place to be. There's if I may, there's this conversation around those of us who have been in the diaspora and have worked for some really interesting companies. I worked at Sony Music, CNN, NBA Digital, and we've done really great work at these companies. Now, when you start trying to translate your experiences back to the continent, that's where you start to really know that there's a lot you don't know. And so you have to immerse yourself in there and really get into the trenches to address the wicked problems that are happening on the continent.
Great, thank you. And for those of you, if you have questions that you want to ask or pose to Chidi, we do have a Slido and a QR code available if you want to go ahead and flash that up. So if we can dig in a little bit more about, tell us about the fact that, cell phones came around, smartphones came around in 2008, 2009, about 15 years ago, and how internet connectivity changed or evolved the continent then, and how AI is and other modern day technology evolutions are going to be impacting the continent over the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so let's unpack that, right? Because one of the things about the continent, if many people may or may not know, is that many of these countries really are relatively young when you compare them to some of the other Western nations. So Nigeria's 1960, so it's about 65 years old, and most of the countries are about that young in terms of their independence. And so what that means is technology has taken its time to really permeate that environment, most of those environments. Some today are much more advanced than others. So if you go to Rwanda, where I'm going next in a couple of days, they have done such a great job of really upgrading the basic infrastructure to be able to support the technology that is needed to build the kind of products that you need. There are other countries that are behind, and there are other countries that are lockstep with them. So the challenge of building for, and let's use better language, the challenge of creating value for customers, for citizens, for businesses on the continent is really predicated on making sure that we are still fundamentally understanding what these problems look like, what these pain points are, making sure that we're not making the wrong assumptions, because that's what's happened. A lot of companies have come on the continent and they're very assumption led. We did this in the US, so we should be able to do this in Tanzania. That's not the way it works, right? We go up to Egypt, it's the same way that you do business in South Africa. That's not the way it is. And so technology has been great, but it still comes down to the basics. How do you make sure that you're validating all these assumptions that you're making going in, and you have to be in it. You have to be with the user, the customer, the market, the people, before you can even start thinking, okay, well, we're going to take PayPal and just drop it in Ghana. That doesn't work. So technology has been great. The smartphone has been great, but still the fundamentals of products, it doesn't matter, right? Where you are, the fundamentals of building products still apply. You need to go and understand the customer, understand their pain points, draw insights, use those insights, come up with some thesis, and then go with it and see whether it works or not.
You talked about validating assumptions, and we touched a little bit on just how many diverse cultures and audiences there are across the entire continent. In your product coaching experience, how are you guiding the product leadership on the continent to make sure that they're allowing ample time to validate all those assumptions across such diverse audiences?
Mary, I mean, you're making it, okay, using the assumption language, you're making the assumption that they're even testing and validating, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the challenges that we've run into, and I'm talking, see, product is actually relatively nascent on the continent, right? So one of the challenges that we've seen the product community, especially those on the continent, but those of us also who are experts, who are in the diaspora and who have moved over there or doing our work over there, one of the challenges we've seen is that it is a very solution-oriented, solution-first oriented mindset. So it's, hey, I went to a conference at Davos and they're talking about AI, AI, AI. Well, we need to build an AI. And you notice what I did there? I said, we need to build an AI. I didn't say an AI this or AI that. I said, we need to build an AI. You know, when apps, and apps are still popular today, but when the app culture was really building, that's what everybody was doing. We need an app. We need an app to do this. We need an app to do that. Very solution oriented. We were kind of going solution first. All the ideas, remember, product people will appreciate the hippo, right? The highest paid person's opinion being the driver of product development, as opposed to real hardcore, I like to call it pure undiluted discovery, right? And so, you know, that's been the work. The work has been the mind shift. We're trying to get folks, leaders especially, to understand that you have to allow your teams to truly be empowered to go and figure out what problems to solve. Yes, give them direction, the strategy. These are the arenas that we will play in, right? So, for instance, you'll see agriculture is a big deal on the continent. Health is a big deal on the continent. So we're going to play in these arenas, right? Now, let's figure out what the pain points are, what problems we're going to solve, and then let's go solve those problems. So that has been at the top of the kind of the chain for those of us who are doing work, especially at the coaching level. So I'm a coach, product leadership coach. I'm a product discovery coach. So that's been at the top in terms of trying to get them to stop giving orders to their teams, and instead giving them strategic direction and then allowing them to go do the work. And then the second piece, I talked about discovery. Yeah, so discovery is absolutely something that is becoming more and more of an adopted mindset, but it's actually at the lower ranks, right? So there's entrenched mindsets at the leadership level in terms of that discovery conversation, and so that's also part of the work that we're doing. Is we're trying to make sure that first, if you're thinking about testing and validating and experimenting and making sure that you're getting the right types of information that will drive your solution. We're trying to make sure that our leaders are also thinking about that too.
Right. I think you can never say too many times, regardless of where you're practicing product in the world, to make sure that you're falling in love with the problem as opposed to the solution. And that's something that I have to continuously remind myself to do here, even in Richmond. I wanted to go back to something you said about Kigali and how Kigali has invested in their infrastructure. Could you tell us a little bit more about what role do any kind of infrastructure challenges play in shaping product decisions or product advancement within the continent, and any examples that you yourself have experienced with the organizations that you coach and work with?
Well, let me use two examples. This is a very interesting one, right? So think about, let me not address connectivity, payments, and logistics. Those are actually they're very simple. Let me talk about electricity, right? So in this country, the United States of America, you and I, we can go get a Tesla, we can go get a Volvo, an EV, knowing fully that all they have to do is install a battery, a charger in our garages, and we're good, right? And then there's an infrastructure of charging stations that you can trust. Although even that's a problem here, right? Because folks are not sure if they can maybe take a trip in their EV from Atlanta to, let's say, I don't know, California safely. Think about that on the continent. The grid is still not up to par in most countries, right? In South Africa, there's what they call load shedding, which means that every night, they'll have a schedule for light and then they'll take it out and then go back on schedule. Same thing in Zambia. So it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge where basic things like electricity, We're all talking about AI. And the fundamentals of AI is power and connectivity, right? If you don't have connectivity, if you don't have power, what AI is of no use to you, right? Because these are not necessarily native applications that we're building with AI. You need connectivity and you need electricity. The data centers that are powering AI depend on significant amounts of power. I think they said that AI is going to consume maybe, I think I heard 15-20% of all power by 2030. So on the continent, the challenge is, these kinds of things is having a grid that can withstand the advent of technology such as AI, the kinds of infrastructure that allow you to introduce electronic vehicles in the market. And you mentioned Rwanda in Kigali. That's been kind of the mindset. If and I say this because they are kind of front and center in terms of attention on the continent, and they've built a grid that can actually handle electronic vehicles. There's power is relatively constant. They have a public sector. They have a public sector strategy that has said that connectivity, I saw payments, that's also part of it. All those pieces need to be in place as we build our digital society. And so that's the same thing that we're seeing in some other countries. And some other countries are still lagging when it comes to that. So infrastructure is key. And that's why part of my work is I also coach leaders in the public sector across Africa, because you don't do product on the continent and just think it's a private sector thing. No, the public sector has to be in the mix. In fact, I've been introducing the product mindset into many of the ministries of ICT on the continent because they need to get it. And I've told them, you need to start competing with the private sector. That way the citizens get to benefit. And that's the way we get to do that on the continent in terms of building the kind of products that citizens want, is if the public sector is just as switched on when it comes to product thinking and the product mindset and product operating models as the private sector.
I think it's, I mentioned during your introduction and your bio that you work with the African Leadership University. I think that's where you have potentially had interactions with a lot of the public sector leadership across the continent. Can you tell us a little bit more about the private versus public sector mindsets? And are the public sector mindsets catching up, if you will, or is there still a lot of growth opportunity there?
I mean, there's a lot of growth opportunity. Shoot, there's a lot of great growth opportunity here in the States. Right? So it's not, this is not just an Africa thing. And when we say Africa, I will always make sure that remember that 54 segments, 54 countries. So some of those countries are doing much better than others. But let's talk about the partnerships, right? So I would say about 4 years ago, I wasn't doing any work in the public sector. I thought the public sector was a hellhole. I just didn't, you try to get a visa from some countries, or you're trying to get in, trying to get a business license in another country. It was a nightmare. And so many of us in the private sector, we just wrote off the public sector. In fact, you're building a business and you wanted to minimize contact with the public sector. But then about 3.5 years ago, I started doing this work. There's a fellowship program at the African Leadership University called the Public Sector Fellowship by the Center for a Reimagined Africa. And, they brought me in and they said, look, Chidi, we've seen the work you're doing in the private sector. However, we believe this stuff needs to translate into the public sector. So we came in and designed this product leadership accelerator for senior leaders at the public sector level. It's been transformative, right? Because yes, it is entrenched. It is very hierarchical. It is very bureaucratic, very solution oriented. There's this thing called the Oga culture. Oga means big man, big woman, right? The big leader. Everything they say to do, that's what you do, right? They are the ones that they come into a room, you stand up. It's just the way it is. And because of that, there's not a whole lot of creativity. There wasn't you didn't see the kind of creativity that you saw in the private sector, in the public sector. So in the last 3 years, and I'm not saying it's just us at the Public Sector Fellowship, but what we're seeing is kind of a cascading effect of, when books like Empowered and Transformed. And I bring that up because Marty, his books are actually being read by many of these public sector leaders. Some other, other product people like Melissa Perry, and I know Teresa Torres, they're all getting attention on the continent. And the public sector leaders are starting to pay attention. They're starting to hear people like myself tell them, you need to put the citizen first. You need to fall in love with the problem, not the solution, right? Assumptions are not facts. Right? We can't just build off of assumptions. And the new thing for me is also that the public sector has to also have a revenue mindset, just like the private sector, right? So this year has been very critical for the continent because they've lost a significant amount of funding given the new administration in Washington, D.C., and then many of the European countries have also taken the same approach, which is, we're going to reduce our funding on the continent. So all of a sudden, projects are not being funded the way they used to be. So we're pushing back and we're saying public sector products now have to be commercialized. They have to be commercial. They have to find revenue generating models. They have to have business models that actually create financial value. And that's where the excitement is building for the public sector today.
Thank you for that. Speaking about opportunities and market sectors, which markets, you mentioned agriculture and health. I think a lot of people probably think of payments and banking as well, but which markets are you seeing that have the fastest growth for tech and product innovation right now?
I mean, yes, the fintech sector is hot, right? Very hot. If you go to the biggest markets on the continent, I would say Nigeria, you go to Kenya, you go to South Africa, a lot of the innovation that you're seeing is in the fintech sector. So that goes without saying. And I'm not going to belabor it because that sector has a significant amount of evangelists out there that are making sure that the world knows that fintech is a big deal on the continent. In fact, a lot of funding that came into the continent is in the fintech sector. I mentioned agriculture, big deal. The goal, there's a stated goal for Africa to be kind of the food bed for the world, right? And there are opportunities that tech and AI are providing to make that happen. The health industry, is also one that is ripe for disruption on the continent. When you talk about smartphone penetration and you talk about connectivity, those two pieces have brought significant advancements when you think about how people are able to take care of themselves, either prior to getting sick or after, during the process of getting treated for their sickness and post their sickness. So there's some really good opportunities there. But the one place I do want to emphasize, and this is near and dear to my heart, because I did build a creative startup on the continent, is the creative sector. And the creative sector is so critical to Africa. Now you'll start, as I mentioned in a conversation we were having earlier, the creative sector is really starting to grow on the continent. It is one that is critical to the continent's narrative. I like to say that Hollywood was America's PR machine, and Africa needs its own PR machine. And you're starting to see that on platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, where the creative industry you're starting to see people start to really bring that creative energy to the world. And then, you look at the music industry, the South Africans, the Nigerians, they are doing very well. And then, of course, the movie industry is very nascent. The third biggest movie industry in the world is Nollywood, which is Nigerian, right? And then some of the best movies that are being made on the continent are in South Africa. And so the creative industry is one that I'm very excited about. Now, people say, what about AI? What about crypto? Those are not, I don't see them as industries. Those are underlying technologies that are powering most of these industries that we see, and so that those are the ones that I wanted to point out right now.
Excellent. I had not heard that term before, Nollywood, but I love it.
Now you do, right?
So speaking of the creative sector and the fact that there's such an empowering film or video industry happening on the continent, what kind of cultural contexts would you say influence product design and adoption within the continent and the users across those 54 countries?
Great question. So let me say a couple. Let me say, I had a great conversation with. There's this gentleman. His name is Lassina Kone. He is the managing director of Smart Africa. Smart Africa is this organization that was built to essentially foster the digitization across the continent. And he said something that stuck with me, and I've been running with it, which is, Africa is built on what we call a trust economy. So if you think about the West, excuse me, I'm sorry, Africa is built on a truth economy, and the West is built on a trust economy. What does that mean? So you and I can go to a car dealer and, based on, do a credit score, ask you some questions, and then, hey, here's a car, and we'll take our first payment a month later, right? We will order food, and the business knows that once the food gets to the customer, they'll get their money from the customer, and so on and forth. That is a trust economy. We trust that our transactions will be completed. On the continent, most of those environments are truth economies. And that means that everything needs to be verified before I do business with you. Everything needs to be verified before I transact with you. I need to make sure that I will get what I'm going to get before I pay you. And so when you think about that, that means that there are, payment platforms that are different from the ones that we have, in the West or in the US or Europe. And I say that as a way for you to think of, there are cultural nuances, there are local contexts that absolutely drive the adoption of products and the way you build products. I'll use the insurance industry, right? So when you join a company, they are offering you all kinds of insurance products. You get health insurance, life insurance, and all kinds of things. We just make the assumption that that's a good thing for us, and you just run with it. There are many folks that if you offer them insurance, the first thing they're thinking is, wait a minute, are you anticipating that I'm going to die? Is that life insurance is, what are you wishing me bad luck by offering me a life insurance product? And that's real. It's not a joke. There are people, that from a cultural standpoint, you have to understand and work within those contexts to make sure that you understand, to make sure that you're solving those problems for those people. So it's a very interesting environment. And as I said, it may be different in Sierra Leone than it is in Angola. There's also something else, right? So when we say Africa, we say 54 countries, but there's also regions. And yes, unfortunately, I don't know, I call it unfortunate because I don't think this is a good thing, but there's kind of a demarcation. They call it, you heard the term sub-Saharan Africa, right? Sub-Saharan Africa is essentially all the countries below the Saharan line. And yes, there is kind of you'll see that the Libyas and the Moroccos, the Egypts, Tunisia, Algeria, those countries that are closer to the Middle East, they are part of what they call MENA, North Africa and the Middle East. So again, you say Africa, but it's not quite as black and white as it seems. There's so many nuances, so many things to think about. And you have to, that's also part of your considerations as you build on the continent.
Tell me about the day-to-day. You talked a lot about mindsets and validating assumptions and not focusing not completely being a solution first oriented economy, but what kind of skills or mindsets have you seen product managers using that help them succeed within these unique environments? Um,
Yeah, well, so we talked about fall in love with the problem, but think about this, right? If your leaders are solution oriented, that's a challenge. You can't just go to them and say, "Well, leader, fall in love with the problem," right? If they are powerful, if they have success, right? So that's the other thing, is they've had success. Then you can't come at them and just be like, "Well, fall in love with the problem, not the solution." You have to find ways to make sure that they understand that this concept is real. So that's why the role of experimentation, show, don't tell, is starting to grow, right? And I would say AI is this is where AI has been incredible. We talk about Lovable and Bolt and Riplet and all these vibe coding platforms. Um, you need, you have to show that it is good to fall in love with the problem. Also, incremental progress, right? So you want to prototype and make sure that you can show them that, look, we think that there's something here, but it's going to take a little bit of time, as opposed to just deploying $20 million to build an app. So that's kind of the day to day is, and as I said before, the younger people, you showed the stat about younger folks, and the median age is 19.3 years, right? Younger people they are switched on. They understand the stuff. But the frustration is the people at the top who have been entrenched and have a certain mindset. So it's a show, don't tell type of environment now. It's let me go into Figma and build a prototype. Let me use Lovable and build an app that actually replicates some of the use cases that we've discussed and allows us to get some insights from the market. So I would say that's at the core of the day to day. I have to be real. It's also a struggle. There's not as many product management jobs as we would like. We also don't think that they are paid as well as they should be. So there's frustration. There's some frustration around that, and there's also a lot of job hopping. Right, folks are just jumping from one job to the other. They become entrepreneurs. They're doing 2 or 3 gigs. This is all kind of part of what you will call an ecosystem that is finding its way, and we're seeing that across the board. But in terms of just folks are learning, you have access to so much knowledge now, right? When I was coming up, even in the States, we didn't have access to all this knowledge. I just had Inspired or what's his name? Not Andreessen, Horowitz, Ben Horowitz. I had his book. Those were kind of the ways we did it. Now you just go on LinkedIn, you got everybody's, all kinds of experts giving you all kinds of information. And so that is helping the young people and also the leaders to start to look at, okay, there's some practices out there that we can implement and build really great products.
Thank you. And I just wanted to remind our listeners that there's a QR code in the upper corner of the screen. And if you have any questions for Chidi, please go ahead and submit them. We'd be happy to read them aloud and get Chidi's take on your burning questions. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about how the work that you, in partnership with the Innovate Africa Foundation and Silicon Valley Product Group, the work that you're doing on the continent regarding the Inspire Africa conference. And Brian, if you wouldn't mind pulling up that slide just for a second. For those of you that aren't familiar, the Inspire Africa conference was created. Hold on, go back one, Brian. Thank you very much. Was created 3 years ago, was the inaugural event, and there were over 1,000 people that traveled to Lagos, Nigeria, from over 30 different countries in Africa to attend this event. Chidi was there. He was a primary speaker, as well as all 6 of the Silicon Valley Product Group partners. And this year, as Chidi mentioned, he's traveling in just a few days to the 3rd instance of this particular event in Kigali, Rwanda. This is the largest technology product conference on the continent. And Chidi, what else can you tell us about the event and the demand for sessions and knowledge like this amongst the product managers and the aspiring product managers across Africa?
Yeah, this is exciting. I for some context and history. When I met Christian Idioti, who is one of the partners of Silicon Valley Product Group. I met him in 2022 at the second Coach to Coaches. It was a Coach to Coaches session that SVPG held in New York City, December. I will never forget because it was cold and it had snowed. So it was a very memorable event. And at the time, Christian was now thinking of, okay, how do we? He's he started a foundation. He wanted to, he's diaspora. He lives in Chicago, but one of the greatest coaches, product coaches out there. And he was thinking, okay, I'm Nigerian, and it's time. I need to do my thing on the continent. So when he met me, he said, look, we're going to do this conference, and I need your help. Fast forward to October 2023, and it was just an amazing thing to see, especially with his partners, Marty Kagan, Leah Hickman, Chris Jones, and the rest of them. They all showed up and gave powerful masterclass. We had some great speakers, and the key, one thing I appreciated about that was it was local. It was African product people that were on stage speaking about building products for the people of the continent. And so we've done this twice already. We're about to do the third. Kigali is the first time it's left Lagos because this is a Pan-African event. It is not a Nigerian event or a Ugandan event or a Rwandan event. It's a Pan-African event. So this is the first time we're going to be outside of Lagos. And the exciting thing is it's actually smaller, but it's more packed with leaders and just much denser with people who are doing this as leaders and also as practitioners. So the conference is something that we were excited about. We call it the largest product conference, but I call it the only product conference on the continent because there's so many tech conferences, there's so many digital conferences. However, product is really just one aspect of it. Just one aspect of those conferences. This conference is all product. It's very similar to, product at heart or mind the product industry. Very similar in its design in terms of making sure this is about, the practice and the gospel of product. So I'm excited about it. And before you go on, the other good part is, many people know SVPG, they hold these master classes around, inspired and empowered and transformed. And they charge $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for them. They get sold out across the globe. And what they did was they designed masterclass for Africa, right? And it is not for everybody. You can't just say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna fly in from the US to go attend this masterclass. You have to be on continent in order to attend it. And it's an investment by the SVPG group, which I appreciate. They didn't have to do it, but they did. And I'm excited that they're doing the third masterclass on the continent. So
I having the good fortune of seeing the master classes in person myself, having worked as a volunteer for the Inspire Africa conference, I can say that the tailoring of the content for the African audience was just fantastic and amazing, and the energy in the room that came from the individuals hearing yourself, Christian, Marty, Gabby, all the others share their stories and share their perspectives. It was contagious, and I'm so proud to continue to be involved in a small way. And I wish you guys so much luck this year in Kigali. How would product managers that are outside of Africa plug in to support these ecosystems or their product practitioner partners in within that are within the continent?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a tough question. It's a simple question. um, there's so many ways, look, again, such a huge landscape. Um, and we all, those of us who have had the pleasure, the luck to work at some really great companies here in the States and other places, this is about knowledge transfer, but it's also about learning too, right? So one of the first things I would do is learn. Just be open. Start to understand, okay, I'm a product guru. I know product like the back of my hand. But when you go to Africa, or if you're thinking of Africa, I need to know what I don't know. That is the first thing I would say is I need to know what I don't know, because there's a lot that we don't. It took me years before I got to where I am in terms of, getting myself acclimated to the continent. So there are people myself, there's, Christian, as I said, there's some of us who are, putting out all kinds of really good information as to how to do product on the continent. There are, product people on the continent who are also starting to publish their own uh, thoughts and experiences in doing product on the continent. So that's the first piece I would say. You just gotta, you have to start to change your mindset, because again, look at us. We have no concerns about power, right? We're doing this right now in the States. We don't think power is going to go out. That is actually a constant concern if I was doing this on the continent. Many times you'll see people drop in, drop out, drop in, drop out. Why? Because they have run out of power. And then, of course, connectivity in terms of access to data, right? The way we do data, unlimited data for, the month. No, that's not usually the case for many people there. So you need to know what you don't know. So that's number one. Number two is a conference like Inspire Africa Conference. Attend it, right? Just say, I want to register for this conference. It's not just Inspire Africa. I know in South Africa there's the Afro Tech Fest is coming up. I think that's next month. Yes, you should attend these events. They're all over the continent. Some are big, some are small, some are intimate, some are just very large. So when you come and visit, first you're on continent. That's number one. That's what Mary did, right? Mary has been in Lagos twice, so she can speak to this because she was on continent. Then you get to meet the folks who are doing the work. You get to hear people kind of give you those nuances that you don't know, those local contexts, those local contexts that you just don't know about, right? And then, look for collaboration opportunities. If there is an opportunity for you to teach, right, do that. Because for me, the way I became who I am as, one of the top product coaches on the continent or product voices on the continent was through teaching. And that's how I learned about most of these things and most of these markets. So that's those would be some of the suggestions top of mind. I mean, there's also opportunities to kind of donate, or and I actually hesitate to use that word donate. I don't want that to be the mindset. I think it's more like you contribute your if financially to certain, if there's a conference and they're asking you to pay, you pay for it, right? If they're looking to sponsor scholarships for product schools or product fellowships, sponsor a fellow or two. I would say that's how we'll get this work done. That's how you can get yourself plugged in and just keep your ears on the ground and see what's going on the continent.
That sounds fantastic. And if you don't mind moving forward to the next slide, Brian, we do have some information here about the Innovate Africa Foundation. So there's a very ambitious goal to enable 100,000 product people to tackle Africa's opportunities, including 10 million lives through innovation and sustainable development. So, if anybody wants to learn more about the foundation, which is the parent organization of the Inspire Africa Conference, please go ahead and scan that QR code. You can learn more there.
And while you leave that QR code up there, let me just also mention, something that I did that I was able to do with the foundation. So I don't work for the foundation, but I work with them. and which was the Product Leadership Accelerator. It was the goal, the vision that we had for the accelerator was we will create what we call product unicorns, human beings who are some of the best product people on the planet, and they are on the continent. And so the Leadership Accelerator has actually launched. They have 30 fellows who will be joining us in Kigali next week. They've been going through it. They've had some of the best coaches from across the world. I'm talking in Germany, Brazil, New York City, Lagos, Rwanda. I was one of them too, and it's just been an amazing experience to see this happen. So the Product Leadership Accelerator is also another way you can support. If there's a new cohort, maybe you could be a coach, you could be a mentor. That would be something that I would like to also, showcase as an opportunity to support. And there are other product schools too, or other product. I'm sure there are other product fellowships. I don't think they're as good as PLA, of course, but I'm sure there are opportunities that you can use to now, bring your knowledge, your experience, your badassery, right, as I like to say, and bring it into the fold on the continent.
And I can personally attest to the opportunity of being a mentor to a founder on the continent. Her name is Anne, and she lives in Lagos, Nigeria. I met her through the Inspire Africa conference, and she is changing the lives of women across the country with a maternal mental health and postpartum support technology solution. So it is one of the most rewarding and fulfilling bodies of work that I've ever been involved with. So as Chidi said, just mentoring and support, you never know what kinds of fulfillment or lives you may change as a result of reaching out. Chidi, we do have 2 questions from the audience. I don't know if you want to go ahead and let us know what those are, Grant.
There we go. Yeah, sure can. We can actually pop those up. Why don't we do like this? And we've got from the audience. So how do you approach influence in Africa? How much time do you spend there? And then what initiatives are you prioritizing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been kind of it was drip initially, and then it became a flood, and that's just the way it is, right? Isn't that product is, you experiment here, somebody calls you here, one little test there, and then before you know it, you're scaling, right? You're just all over the place. I started doing my work on the continent in 2014, 2015, and it just started as just a couple of well, actually, it started with my entrepreneur. I started a company that was based on the continent. It was a creative company. It was a startup. And so the approach really was I wanted to solve a fundamental problem on the continent, which is the fact that creatives on the continent just were not being supported from an infrastructure standpoint, but also from an ability to make a living, right? Standpoint. And we already know how hard it is to be a creative anyways, but try doing that on the continent. So that was a problem that we were trying to solve. And so we built this company. And in trying to use the practices that I had as a product executive and then as a product person on the continent, I had to learn a lot. And then people saw how I was doing things and they said, well, we like that, Chidi. Can you please help us? And so that's where the product coaching and advisory started to kind of build. I was already doing that in the States. So the thing is, I do practice my practice also is America based, and I have clients here or partners here. However, on the continent, that wasn't the plan. I just wanted to build something there, but I started to see that the opportunity was also there to do coaching and advisory. So I started doing that there also. The other piece, as I said, responding to Mary's last question, I also started teaching, right? I actually became the head faculty for what I call PI, Product Innovation and Entrepreneurship, at a university and started teaching this stuff. And it was resonating so hard that, it's just like people were just snapping it up and just enjoying the conversations, and the transformation was just amazing to see. So that's what happened. It was like drip, drip, and then before you know it, boom, you're building something on the continent, and then you're teaching, and then people are asking you to come and do this, and come and help us with this, and come and help us with that. And that's how it grows, right? And I would say initially I was spending maybe 10% of my time on the continent. Now I'm spending approximately 60 to 70% of my time on the continent in terms of my product work.
Okay, let's do. We've got 3 or 4 now, so let's keep going. Are you seeing any difference in education, training, certs, resources, leverage for people in product between continents?
Ooh, you see, the key word there is between. That's the product person, right? They put that in there just so that so between. I don't see. So between is funky for me, right? So I used to teach at General Assembly, right? So I used to do the consumer side. I was the first instructor here in Atlanta, and then I went to the enterprise side. So it was easy to do the work here. Just, there's General Assembly, they create a lot of content, you help them create the content, then you go deliver it. But if you try to take that same content and go to the continent, it didn't work at all. That's not true. Okay, that's not true. It worked to a certain extent, but started to break down when it met some of those fundamental nuances that I told you about earlier, right? And so, yes, there are differences. One of the things, so it's interesting, one of the things is people on the continent, they want proof. There has to be proof that I went and got this certificate. And because of that need to have that proof of completion or proof of participation, whatever that is, a lot of false prophets, that's what I call them, false prophets, have taken advantage of that. You know what? Let me read a book here. Let me read a book there. Let me take my General Assembly experience. I'll build a school. And then I'll just kind of slap together some classes. You finish it, you pay me, I'll give you a certificate. And so that hasn't been very good for the product world on the continent. And it's one of the things that we, myself, Christian, and some other top product people have been thinking about how we tackle that on the continent. However, the one thing we all know is that at the core of it, product is product is product is product, right? It's all about value creation. And so many of the practices in terms of the stuff that we're learning, some of the core principles, some of the frameworks that we use, they do translate, right, between where, the States and the continent. And then what you need to do is you now have to make sure that the local contexts are added into it. One of the things that we've been doing more is using local examples. So the tendency is for many of these educational platforms to say, well, Facebook did this when they launched, this is what they did, and Google did that, right? And Tesla did this, and Dropbox did that. And after a while, you start to sound disingenuous. And so we're starting to use local examples. M-Pesa, one of the best mobile money stories on the planet ever, right? M-Pesa in Kenya. You have companies like Flutterwave in Lagos, M-Kopa. So there's so many examples that we're starting to integrate that you need to make sure you use to highlight the fact that you're on the continent. So I think that the question is, yes, there's opportunities for some of the stuff that we're learning, some of the educational resources that we have here to translate over there. But again, the local context is key. And I would say, if it's such a great opportunity to do the research and do the legwork and the homework to prepare a course that you're going to teach on the continent. You learn so much, right? You learn so much, and it's very fulfilling. So that's a great question, a wonderful question.
Okay, let's. I think I've got 2 more here. All right. Any examples of? I think we talked about government earlier. and your work there. There are a lot of countries, but any examples of product-led government change, or more so that product influence within the government over time?
Yeah, so let me give two quick examples. I'll go back to Rwanda because they're top of mind. So one thing that I love about the public sector is that when you have a leader that's switched on, it is amazing to see the kind of work that they do. So this is on the talent level, right? Let's talk about just talent development. The minister of ICT in Rwanda, her name is Paula Ingabire. When she came into office, one of the first things she did was she created the role of a chief digital officer. And the chief digital officer is not like, the chief digital officer of Facebook or, Turner. The way she saw it was these are kind of the hardcore product people that she would now deploy to each ministry across the government in Rwanda. And so these chief digital officers are product people, and their role is to become the product evangelists, the product thinkers, the product agitators in each of the ministries. And so I've worked with many of these chief digital officers, and it is amazing to see the kind of transformation they brought to the industry, which is, they're helping the leaders over there, the teams over there to be, again, understand what problems they're solving, understand how they can create value, and make sure that they're not just taking, $100 million from the World Bank and just deploying solutions. No, they are actually becoming more systematic in the way they think about how they deploy solutions, how they build solutions and deploy those solutions. So that's really been very exciting to see. And I'm also starting to see other governments adjacent to Rwanda start to look at that model. Uganda is one example. I know that they're starting to think about how do we have these kinds of product leaders inside each of the ministries, right? They're embedded in these ministries, and then they go and do work with them. And then another example is in Kenya. There's actually been a number of efforts in the health ministry, right, to digitize the way they do work. One of the main issues you see on the continent is maternal deaths, right? A lot of women are dying because of, they bleed out when they're giving birth, and there's not enough resources to get the remedies to the hospitals, right? So one of the things I've seen in Kenya is that in the public sector, there are some really switched on leaders who have now brought the product mindset into the health ministry to say, okay, look, we need to make sure. I think what was happening is they were throwing solutions at the maternal death issue. They would just say, okay, well, we need better medicines, or we need better interventions from the doctors. But what they didn't do was really truly get to the root issue of what was going on. And without just giving you too many details, what happened was a couple of the medical leaders who had gone through some product training, what they did was they got into a question of what is the problem here, right? Like, what is the fundamental issue that we're dealing with here? And what you saw was they discovered that many of these mothers were coming in late to the process when it came to making sure they were getting prenatal care. Many of the doctors, actually that's not true. It's not the doctors. The healthcare providers in the rural areas were not fully equipped in terms of understanding some of the issues that may lead to maternal deaths. And so in Kenya, they built this infrastructure to start to use product thinking to address the core issues around maternal deaths, right? So again, I know we're running out of time, so I want to make sure I don't belabor it. But those are two examples that I wanted to give that I've seen that have been very exciting.
That's real impact. That's really incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this one's a little bit different. Last one here, and we'll just go real quick. So understanding, I think we had the median age at like 19 point something. So you're looking at tech natives. How does understanding the population skews tech natives accelerate the opportunities or impact that you can have there?
So first, young people are young people are young people. They are cool. They are hip. I walk into a room. Actually, these days I don't give them the opportunity to think that they can out hip or out cool me, right? But that's a different story. There's some ninja moves that I had to do in order to make that happen. However, these are young. They are used. They see what's going on. For instance, Grant, if you think about AI, the way they use the AI is very different, right? And so if you understand, again, this is the youngest population in the world. If you understand not only that they are switched on, they see what their fellow young people are doing, using social media, using the internet, they go to school, some of them even travel, come back. They're seeing these things and they have demands, they have asks. They are not just sitting back and saying, well, the infrastructure doesn't work, so what can we do? No, they are saying, we want these things, we want these solutions, we want these technologies. Once you understand that, what it does is it brings a sense of urgency, right, to the work that we do, but it also requires a certain level of patience, right? Because you just can't outrun the technology, or you can't outrun the infrastructure problems that you have there. And so it is a balance, right? And this actually, the reason I like this question is, as eager and as aggressive as the young people are, and understanding that, and you use that as part of your approach when you're thinking about products and building products, understanding that is key. However, I've actually been preaching this concept of what we call gray gold, which is the over 50s on the continent. And I feel like we need to tap into that well of knowledge, because they understand the continent more than the young people do. They've been through it. They've seen, they've gone from, analog phones to smartphones. They've seen the infrastructure issues. They understand some of they understand most, and if not all of the issues that we're dealing with. And so when you bring that knowledge, it absolutely supercharges the way you approach working with young people and helping solve their problems, and the fact that they are tech natives and addressing some of the wicked problems that they're dealing with. So my answer to your question is yes. You want to make sure that you're immersed. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're not addressing their issues, you're not listening to them, you're not making sure that you're trying to address them. But I also think that there's a balance where the over 50s are brought in also to kind of make sure that we're not just chasing ghosts or just chasing, fantasy. We are actually addressing the real issues that are happening on the continent.
That's all we've got in terms of questions. We're over time, so this has been a thrilling, engaging conversation. We've learned just an incredible amount here. Mary, do you want to tie us up?
Sure. Chidi, thank you so very, very much for this informative and enlightening hour and change, and giving us a very small glimpse into your work on the continent and what's going on within the entire continent and the product practice there. Again, if anybody's interested in learning more, follow Chidi on LinkedIn, follow the Inspire Africa Conference on LinkedIn. Next week is their Power Week of this amazing event next week in Kigali. And there's always the Innovate Africa Foundation, which could use your support as well. So thank you all so very much for your time today. I hope you had a good time, and we're happy to stay in touch over LinkedIn. Take care, everybody.
Sure. Thank you.